You tell me when we're ready, Ellie.
We are ready. You can go.
Are we ready, our end? Okay. Yeah. I want to welcome everybody to this week's camp meeting here in California. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, we thank you not only for this holy Sabbath day, but for the privilege of being able to gather together as we try to understand our own humanity and your divinity. May we have a clearer understanding of what the great test means to us individually and corporately. In Jesus' name, amen. For those who have joined us online today, what you may not know is that we had a Vesper study yesterday evening. As we did last month in Arkansas. That meeting wasn't live streamed, but it was recorded. And the recording will be uploaded in due course. So for those of us who were in that study, just want to have a quick review of what we looked at. I'm just going to go back to the board work that we did yesterday. So the title of the study yesterday I think it's something like a review of the past 12 months. And I received a question on, I'm going to call it the nature of God. So we spoke about the various subjects that have been discussed over the past 12 months. This is not a comprehensive list. And neither are the titles in order. So we've discussed organization, diet, self-defense, radical feminism, of course, fast brain, slow brain, voting, the nature of God and humanity, the threefold union, the gospel versus the mystery of iniquity, And that was a study that was done by Jones, I think in 1892. I say a study, it was actually a sermon that he did. We've begun looking at Christ Object Lessons, chapter 5. I think that's page 76. I might be wrong. And obviously the subject of equality. There were a couple that we missed. Self-defense was connected to the Second Amendment. So we may or may not think that we've missed that or not, but we had a relook at the Second Amendment and looked at it from a different perspective. So then I asked the reasons why we had covered those topics. Got three answers. To divine the gospel, to understand God's kingdom, and someone said to remove biases. And all of those are correct answers. I'm going to jump to the end. I think I have it here. So the answer to the original question was to better understand, better define what radical feminism means to us. So for the translator, I've changed the audio settings for this meeting to see if it works. And I'm not using my normal mic, so I want to see if the translators can pick up the voices of the people here amongst us. So when we looked at the answer to why we had discussed those various subjects, got Christ Object Lessons here as a sort of as a reference point. But for those of us who were in the study yesterday, what are the reasons for that and what are the problems that confront us?
The reasons for what?
Go ahead.
The reasons for what? That's any question.
The reasons why we looked at those various subjects to try to understand radical feminism and the problems that confront us. Anybody? Christine?
We thought radical feminism was different. But it's,
1 second. Can the translators hear that? You don't. Okay, they can hear you. Just speak a tad louder, but they can hear.
so we thought radical feminism was different, but we found that it was similar or the same. As liberal feminism,
Go ahead.
as liberal feminism.
Okay, so that's an important point that's just been brought up. And in fact, it wasn't actually on this list that we had. So I'm just going to update this document where it says radical feminism. We compared that to liberal feminism. And at least for me, that became an important component to this investigation or this study. I think you gave the conclusion of that study or that thought. You did?
That it was the same.
Yes. So I think in the minds of many people here in the movement, we have or had an understanding of what radical feminism was. Before I move on, I want to say that there are various aspects to radical feminism, or we might say various components to it. And what we've discussed so far in the various classes over the last several months is not a comprehensive view, not the definitive answer that I think we need. But it certainly is part of the answer. So in previous studies, when we've compared radical with liberal, we did it from a certain perspective. And what was the perspective of that comparison? If you're not sure what I'm asking, I think I asked something along the lines, what is the objective or purpose for both? Susan.
Yeah, before you clarified, I thought you meant that one would work within the system and one we didn't think necessarily worked within the system, but they both.
Go ahead.
But
Oh.
they both work within the system.
You can all experience the fun that I have in translating. It's not easy, is it? Yes, the point that you made was exactly the one that I wanted us to look at. Many of us had an understanding of radical feminism even though we know the definition of radical is what? Is what? Root. Even though we know the definition is root, we often use it in which way? Extreme. So we clarified that. And when we want to look at social reform, we might use another term, political. And I don't mean that in the sense of politics. When we use the term personal and political, It has an application of individual and corporate or cultural. Or society. Hence the phrase social change or social reform. And when you desire change at that level, both liberal and radical feminism have to operate in the same way, in the same sphere. So I'm suggesting that there's very little to no difference between the two. And I think I made the point that if you just look at the word feminism, just use that, it delivers everything. Delivers everything that you would ever desire with respect to social reform. When we speak about social reform, what are we referring to? Victoria,
Change.
can you hear that online? Bit louder.
Change.
Victoria said change. I assumed you can't hear that. Okay. Christine?
Equality.
Equality. Anyone else? Change is the right answer, but we need to refine that answer. Someone had a hand up? Elaine?
Reform society, social reform, reform society.
So Elaine said to reform society. So reform means to change. It's a compound word. So the form of society will change. And what's the mechanism for that change? There's only one way to change society, really. Susan?
Education.
Education?
Laws.
Laws. So I'm going to go with law. To enact or to have social change or social reform, you have to have legislation. You have to have laws. So I don't know. I think we've spoken about institutional racism. I think I've mentioned that in studies. So obviously it's talking about an institution or an organization. And if you were not racist, if you genuinely believed all people were equal, could you work for an organization follow its rules and be racist? Put your hands up if the answer is no. Yes? Okay, for those people online, most people here have said yes. You personally are not racist. You personally are not racist. Okay, I'm going to swap translators. There may be they may have dropped. So you personally may not be racist, but you work for an organization that is institutionally racist. And in doing so, the way you function or relate to people, you end up becoming racist. You had a point or question, Victoria?
I was just wondering, restate the question, but it's okay.
Okay. So how can that happen? How can an organization that purports to be neutral that employs people who are supposed to be, we'll use the word unbiased or not racist, and the end product of all of that is that racism is perpetuated? How can that happen? Victoria?
The practice of policy or implementing all of.
It's about implementing the policies. That's how it happens. Susan?
Your question was? If you're working for non-racist, was that right? Yeah. Because you can't change the heart with policies and laws.
Susan said because you can't change the heart with policies and laws. So you're an employee. Your heart is good. You're not racist. Yes? The organization legally cannot function in a racist framework. So it's not racist. But we use a term called institutional racism. It's almost like a guiltless crime. A crime with no guilty parties. The organization's rules are not racist. The employees' thought processes are not racist. But racism perpetuates under that system. How does that happen? Does it happen? We agree it happens. How can that happen? Missy?
The institution doesn't get to the root of the problem, why the need is there.
The institution doesn't get to the root of the problem. Victoria?
I think it's because of culture.
Victoria says it's because of culture. Anything else?
And not wanting to let go, like taking their culture in the company or the organization. Um,
Who's taking their culture where?
I think it's a mixture of all, like, so then you have the culture of the company and then you have the individual culture. And so if their culture is toxic.
So
then
Victoria says that the reason this happens is because the culture in the organization is toxic. Okay, I'm going to sort of step out on an edge, and I'm going to say I disagree with some of those answers. The employee, you, is honest-hearted. The organization, when those rules were created, that was done with the best intentions. All the parties, the organization and the employee, are looking at this issue in an honest and straightforward fashion, but the result is bad. Why does that happen? Elaine?
You make laws and policies. Isn't that forcing the conscience of a racist person?
So when you make a law or a policy, you force the will of a racist person. That's true. But we're not discussing racist people, we're discussing non-racist people. And racism is still happening. Francisco.
We have an example where we have laws in place. We have all the proper laws to ensure equality, but yet we don't have equality. And that's
So Francisco, did you hear that? Yeah. Are you? Oh, all done? Okay. Anyone else wants to give any thoughts on this? Besides Victoria. Come on, somebody. Chrissy.
I am thinking that sometimes those laws depend how they are interpreted and the information around it.
Okay, so it depends how those laws that have been written are interpreted and put into effect. Victoria? Okay, something similar. Elaine?
You still have a racist society.
So we still have a racist society, but Susan's not racist. And she works for an organization that all the rules forbid it to be racist. Yet the effect with a good employer and a good employee ends up being racism. Yep.
History or the past? Like, I thought like, real estate, you have a new company that's not racist.
1 second, can you hear this? Okay, so it's there's a historical component to it. And you're going to give an example? Okay.
If you have a real estate company who is not racist.
So there's a real estate company, company that buys and sells properties that is forbidden by law to be racist. And the employee is not racist either, who works for that company.
But there's still problems with racism in the housing market in the US.
But there's still problems in the housing market. Okay. Kathy.
Biases?
So there are biases. You want to explain a little bit more?
Biases that are so inbuilt. You don't even realize you have them.
There are biases. Oh. Name an institutionally racist organization.
Yeah, KKK. KKK.
No, someone said the Ku Klux Klan. I mean a normal one, a proper one. Go ahead.
Heritage Foundation? Or you mean a company? That's not
I mean, I don't mean one of these private. Don't want to say anything bad. These private things. I mean a proper business or that follows the law of the country. Something sort of normal. Go ahead. Prison system. Okay, prison system. It could an organization, something that is necessary as part of society. Can be an organization, can be a company. So the prison system. The financial system.
SCOTUS.
The Supreme Court. I'm gonna skip that one. We'd have to do a bit of digging. So we've got the prison system, the financial system. Someone said insurance, education, healthcare. Sorry? I don't know if you consider the prison service the same as the. So I'm going to say the thin blue line. Law enforcement. I would have thought that would have been number one for everybody. Elaine.
Medical.
Medical. I think we already did that. Healthcare. Okay, so we've mentioned several. Are all those that we've spoken about, prison, education, health, we'll call it the criminal justice system, including the police, are they all institutionally racist? Who said no? No? And some of them or some of them not, or none of them are?
Based by
Okay, so I'm asking you. Are they all institutionally racist? If you looked at their rules, their laws, are there any racist laws there? So everybody agrees no. And the vast majority of the employees who work for those organizations, I'm going to not ask, I'm going to say they're not racist. So we have good employees and good laws. But the outcome of all of that, good laws being executed by good people, results in racism. Let's use the word unfairness. Because it's not just a race issue. There's a gender, there's an age, there's various components to all of that. So there's an inequality that results. There's-
Is it because there's a lack of equity? If everyone's being treated the same, but yet they really aren't given the same opportunities, then they would need equity, which is lacking.
So is there anybody here who's experienced racism by one of those organizations? And how do you think that happened? Why do you think it went wrong? Why were you not treated fairly or equally? When it's against the law for them to discriminate. Who wants to tell us a little story? Eva?
I think why it happened was because that person was exercising their free will and choice to be a racist.
So Eva said it. Go ahead. Yeah. So you're falling into the trap again. You're saying that these are secret racists. I'm talking about people who are not racist and they still have racist results. Anyone else? No one's experienced racism. Victoria?
I've experienced racism, but I can't, like, I have no answer as to how a company that's not racist, the employees are not racist, and yet the outcome is still racism.
Okay. We'll give an example. Oh, Lena?
So.
Oh, wait there. Did you catch any of that? So Victoria says she couldn't come up with it. She couldn't have it. She doesn't have an example given those very strict criteria that I've given. Go ahead.
So my company pledges equality and equal treatment for all classes.
So this is Lena. She says she works for a company that is mandated honestly to treat people fairly, to treat the employees fairly.
So when the company is screening for applicants, they're choosing for the best education and qualification.
So when the the company that she works for screens for new applicants, and they've got some job offers. They're going to use the criteria that they're going to pick the most qualified candidates.
But the applicants, majority of the applicants are widely educated, highly educated people. These rules don't consider the background of people that are coming from. Basically, these rules don't consider equity rather than equality.
So Lena's brought up that word equity again. Because white people generally are going to be better educated than people of color, and they will end up getting the jobs more often than someone of color will. Is that representation what you said? Is that fair representation of what you said? Okay, so we know that this was an issue recently in the courts. When it came to university or college applications. And the people who filed against this mistreatment were whom, interestingly enough? No, not the judge. The people who brought the case. The ones that felt that they had been hard done by or mistreated, unfairly treated. It was Asian people. It wasn't just white people, it was Asians. Because generally speaking, Asians and white people end up getting a better education, end up getting better results at school. And so they felt cheated about not being able to go to college. So that's the example of institutional racism in the education field. And in the employment field. So I'm not sure what you call it here in America, but I think back home, they call it stop and search. A frisk. Okay, so they use the word frisk. Search is frisking. Would you suit search? It's fine. So we have stop and search. And the organizations we have spoken to, which one are we now referring to? Law enforcement or the police? So the rules say if someone looks suspicious, you're allowed to do what? Stop them. And if they look really suspicious, you can search them. You're a police officer and you're not racist. Let's not go into the racist place. We're not racist. We're police officers.
No, they don't. No.
We're going to deal with the ones that are not racist. We know that there are a few that are. The vast majority are not racist. The law says, the organization says, to keep society safe, stop the people and search them. What could be possibly wrong with that? Reasonable people, the police officer, following reasonable rules. You're all members of society. You're not the one who is being stopped. Would you want the police to do that?
Yes.
Stop people who look suspicious. And when you look at them, search them if they look really dodgy. Someone said yes, and someone said no, they wouldn't like that. They wouldn't like to screen people or to, we'll call it prevention. Okay, so some people want it and some people don't. For someone who said they don't want it, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that, Francisco? Why don't you want
They
that?
could find something appetizing that might be illegal, but according to the law says there shouldn't be searching and seizure in any, because that is the law. This is because I may look suspicious to them. I mean, Donald Trump looks suspicious to me. I would search him.
So Francisco says, just because you look suspicious, it's not enough reason to search you. Victoria, why do you think it's wrong or good? Do you think it's, I presume, wrong?
I think it's good to screen, but it can lead, I'll fall back into that trap because I'm thinking it'll still lead to discrimination, because it depends on what suspicion means, like looks to someone. And in my mind, it goes to racial profiling, so it depends on what someone is trained to think suspicious looks like.
Okay, so Victoria says the problem that arises is that, I'm going to try to paraphrase, tell me if I've misrepresented you. The rules seem okay. The officer is attempting to do things in an unbiased, fair fashion, execute the rules, the law. I know you didn't quite say it this way. The problem is different citizens, based upon their life experience, they can tend to react differently to law enforcement than other people. And the rules don't allow for that. When it says stop suspicious people, it doesn't say in parenthesis, by the way, when you stop a young black man, because of their life experience, they're going to behave more nervous than other people. Not codified. So if you apply the law as it's written, as a police officer, that young black person will be nervous and it will look suspicious. So we're given a couple of examples about the limitations of social change or social reform. The way to do it is through changing laws. But because we live in a very complicated world, and laws have to be written in a way that they can be executed, they can be put into effect. It's very limited what you can achieve by social reform. And so, as radical feminists, look at the world, we say it's failing. So there needs to be some radical or extreme change to society in order to make it better. Is that achievable? Is that possible? Can you codify, which means making laws, can you codify yourself out of this problem? Everybody say no here. Okay, so is that a problem of this world? So if it's a problem of this world, is it the same problem in heaven? Which is not of this world. Do you have the same problem in heaven that you have here? Put your hands up if it's no. Put your hands up if it's yes. Okay, so we're in heaven. Don't know how long ago it was. I'll say 6,010 years ago. And what's going on up there? There's war in heaven. Conflict. Before anything ever happens here. So how are we not having the same problem in heaven that we're having here? Seems to me we're having the same problem. And they're all supposed to be super nice, holy people up there. So the reason I mention that, as we discuss radical feminism, liberal feminism, or just feminism, when we talk about social reform, or the law, or institutional inequality, when we deal with all of those related subjects, I want us to understand that it's not just a problem that's happening here on Earth. Because either some, most, or all of those issues occurred in heaven first. Often we all have this idea because we're not nice people. Or we have bad leaders. And that's why there were problems. We had problems in heaven and they had good leaders. They had problems in heaven, there was war in heaven, and they had good leaders. Any comments or we move on? Christy?
So the way I explained this to myself, in heaven, there was war.
I presume you can't hear? Christina said the way she understands things, that there was war in heaven.
It was caused by Satan,
It was caused by Satan,
but Satan was cast out of heaven.
but Satan was cast out of heaven.
So I do not expect in the new heaven to be the same.
In the new heaven, it won't be the same. What you haven't calculated is that I'm going to be there.
This is why we're learning here.
And I'm dangerous. Your thought?
We are getting educated if there will be sin again in heaven, then there is no use for our learning.
Okay, because we're getting educated down here, it's all going to be good up there.
We're not going to be perfect.
Okay, we're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect. Oh, you finished?
Yeah.
Lucifer was perfect, became imperfect in heaven, and there was war. And I think you just said when we go to heaven, we're not going to be perfect. So Christina said that she can't explain it, but she doesn't expect the new earth to have problems. That's what we read. I agree, that's what it says. I have the same hope. My only point in bringing that subject up is what? Was what?
To understand social reform here, how that's possible.
So it's related to social reform. And it's to demonstrate or to consider the fact throwing law at a problem won't fix the issue. We have comprehensive laws in the kingdom of heaven. And it's not enough. So this part of feminism equality, justice, that looks for the eradication of bad laws and the replacement with good law, is necessary, but it's not necessary, but not sufficient. It doesn't produce the harmony that you would expect it to. Victoria.
My question is, before Satan fell, or
Victoria's question is, before the fall of Lucifer,
it was perfect,
it or he?
or, well, he was perfect.
He was perfect. That's a statement you're making.
And the government of heaven, I'm assuming, was perfect.
And the government of heaven was perfect too. Everything was good.
And then everything went bad. When,
And then everything went bad.
my point is, I'm wondering. I don't know how long there was perfection, where heaven was all good, Lucifer was all good. But within that, it seemed to, I'm gonna put it, whatever was in place, the law, or it was, I don't know.
So Victoria says she doesn't know how long everything was good, Lucifer and the kingdom. But it was all good until
Yeah, and if we're trying to get, I don't know. If we
until
want to-
Lucifer fell.
Until war broke out.
Until Lucifer fell and war broke out. And I don't like that model. Why don't I like that model? I'm not saying it's wrong. I can't say to anybody's wrong.
It doesn't seem realistic.
Victoria says it's not realistic. Tell me why a happy citizen suddenly says, I'm going to rebel. Elaine says there has to be a cause. And I'm not saying anybody here, but a good Adventist will say, Lucifer woke up one day and realized that he wanted more, started having bad thoughts, and that's when it begins. Jealousy, if you like. I'm an Adventist. Lena.
Yeah, I think the solution, but he didn't have enough. um, He didn't spend longer time thinking through what this would lead to. And this was an educational moment.
So Lucifer doesn't do what?
Didn't think through the consequences of his action.
So Lena said Lucifer didn't think through the consequences of their actions. Did God think through long enough the implications of their actions? Your answer? Lena says yes, God thought through everything properly, but Lucifer didn't.
Didn't know the finality of this rebellion, the results of this rebellion.
Lucifer didn't know when it was all gonna, how it was all gonna end.
No, he knew, but just like Adam and Eve, they were warned. But they didn't realize they will die.
Is that different to what I just said? Okay. Any more thoughts?
So what he needed to use is the think longer and use slow brain.
Let me ask a question. Did one day Lucifer change? Good and then bad? Everyone said no. Was the bad Lucifer the same Lucifer as the good Lucifer? So someone said, for millennia, heaven was a really nice place. Lucifer was a really nice person. All the rules were the same before and after the war. Lucifer's the same person. So whatever's in Lucifer's heart or mind after he's upset is the same thoughts and ideas that are there before. Or someone said, no, they're not the same. Eva, you want to say something?
Oh, yes, someone said there has to be a cause.
Someone says there has to be a cause.
That it's still a mystery to me, but the only I can think of was that Lucifer asked the question, why am I not equal to God? Why
So
not?
Eva says it's a mystery to her. And the question that Lucifer asked was, why am I not equal?
And so there was no,
What's the mystery to you, Eva?
that why did he even think of it?
Sorry?
Why
Why?
he even thought of that?
So the mystery is, why did Lucifer even think these things? Eva, do you ever think these things?
I just noticed that I'm getting, I got so comfortable.
The question, the simple thing is, do you ever ask yourself, why are things so unfair?
Yeah.
That's a mysterious question to ask yourself.
Now you got me, now.
Oh, so Eva agrees it's not so mysterious.
Okay, so I'll stick with it.
It's a reasonable question to ask, who am I? What is my place in this world? And why do people get treated differently to me? Here it all seems reasonable. Up there it seems like iniquity. And we're certain that it's not going to happen again. When you and I get treated differently in heaven. Because we will get treated differently. For sure. You'll treat people differently in heaven. Sorry?
I hope so.
Oh. Okay. I know we've still got many questions. I just want to in the few moments ago, I want to just summarize what we've said. We've spoken about the limitations of using law to change society. To make things better. We've understood that laws, good laws, are required. Without them, you can't do anything. Soon as you start talking about laws, you have to work within society. Things have to be lawful or full of law. You can't work outside of the system. You can't get change that way. It won't happen. You end up getting anarchy. So we've discussed that. We discussed how and why things get bad on earth. And we've spoken a little bit about the problems in heaven. And I guess it was a bit of a tease when we spoke about heaven on my part. Because I wanted to revisit the idea that the difference between sinful and sinless nature the difference between Lucifer and Satan, if we're going to personify those two thought ways of thinking, the difference is nothing. Lucifer in the good days is very much the same person as Satan is in the bad. So we spoke about these various subjects. Fast brain voting, the nature of God and humanity. Threefold union, the gospel, and equality. Spoke about the reasons why it's important to discuss these subjects. Went back to one of my pet subjects, the difference between sinful and sinless nature is nothing. The natures are the same. This is so important because it's so counterintuitive. But without understanding this, this model, it becomes virtually impossible to understand the sin problem and its origins. I can't remember. So we'll move. Eva and I had a little discussion about the mystery of iniquity. Right here, the mystery. She spoke about a mystery. The gospel versus the mystery of iniquity, contrasting. For me, what the mystery is not how bad people can do good things. To me, that's not so mysterious. What is mysterious to me? Go ahead. Someone said something? I don't know who said. Sorry?
good people doing that.
Why good people do bad things. That to me is the mystery. And the way Ellen White's going to phrase that concept, as in many other places, can lead us astray. As in many other places or models that she gives us, it can lead us astray. The mystery is why good people do bad things. We spoke about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. These are the two nervous systems that moderate, guide, and control you. I've put some words underneath them: calm, excitable, slow brain, fast brain, higher power, lower power. Those 6 words are close approximations to parasympathetic and sympathetic. They're not definitions and they're not synonyms. Recently, we spoke about people's favorite subject. Alyssa? Alyssa's favorite subject, coffee. And I tried to explain why Ellen White says you're not allowed to read any books, listen to any bad music, watch movies, or play sports. It's such a polarizing model that she gives us. And God forbid that you drink a narcotic 3 or 4 times a day. I can hear some music. So I've spoken about music last year. We spoke about coffee this year. And in both studies, I tried to give a fair representation of the facts. And at the same time, I tried to give at least a simple explanation, I hope it was sufficient, of why Ellen White would give the counsel that she did. And if you take those 2 studies together, I'm hoping it gives an explanation of why she says no books, no music, no movies, no sports. Because the way the human mind operates, it cannot distinguish between the real and the imaginary or unreal. So whether you have a knife in your hand or you speak rudely or you're frowning Your victim will respond in the same way. There's just different degrees, but it's the same response. Those three examples I gave will put a person into sympathetic mode. And when you're in sympathetic mode, you have three options. You fight, you flight, or you freeze. And I've given three other words to describe those effects. And what ends up happening is that once you begin to live in a sympathetic mode, for some people, if not many people, becomes addictive. Both emotionally and hormonally. So once you start experiencing that kind of way of living, Ellen White will call them excitable novels. Once you've done one, what do you want after that? You just want another one. And you begin to live in this sympathetic mode. Fight, flight, and freeze. And it's damaging to the human being. We were not really designed to live permanently in that condition or in that way. So her simple answer was no books, no music, no movies, no sports. And no coffee. And no to a whole list of other things. And it's our job to try to understand why that counsel was given, not to throw it away, not to ignore it, and not to think that we live in the 21st century and she lived in the 19th century and she's out of fashion. Or that she was dumb or prudish or didn't know what she was talking about. Which is what most of Adventism has done. They just ignore what she says and just live their lives as they choose to. We then addressed a question that someone asked, does God make mistakes? And the answer to that was what? No. And I began by asking, do humans make mistakes? And the correct answer is no. Humans don't make mistakes. Because we're created in God's image. If God doesn't make mistakes, neither do we. The problem is the mistakes that we make are not because we're human, and the mistakes that God doesn't make isn't because God is divine. It's all about information. We love that phrase, information warfare. Either we don't have enough information, or we misread the information, or we have bad, wrong information. This is our problem. And as Lena told us yesterday, this movement is pretty sophisticated at dealing with this issue. To err is human, it's half of a saying, is an incorrect statement. It's all about the data. And we should be confident today that we can get to a close approximation of the truth. I doubt that we'll get to the truth, because of the information problem. But we can get pretty close if we follow the rules. And something that has been an ongoing study is Christ object lessons. And we'll tie up that loose end, or at least begin to, in our next study. The loose end, I mean, is what's on your screen at the moment. Not the entirety of chapter 5. It's a bit much to do in one class. Let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, I want to thank you personally on my own behalf and on behalf of others for the work that you're doing in us and through us. We may not see the effects of that work. We might not understand the influence that we have upon others. But you have promised that as you have begun this good work in us, you will see it to completion. May each of us hold on to this promise. In Jesus' name, amen.